According to sleep researchers, we really don't understand a great deal about sleep and the consciousness we move through when we're asleep. But according to kind of the best imperfect knowledge we currently have, all of us do dream in REM sleep multiple times a night. Many of us may not remember any of those dreams. You may remember the one you're having when you wake up, either because you need to pee or because it's the alarm clock or the cat or the dog or your sweetheart's snoring or whatever it is. If you wake up during a dreaming cycle, you may remember that dream. You all know this. I'm not going to ask for a show of hands, and I'm not going to ask you to share the deep, dark recesses of your unconscious mind by telling me what you dreamed last night, but just think for yourself, do you recall any dreams from last night? A lot of you will not, some of you will. Why do I bring that forward? Because it's a tremendous teaching for the nature of reality and the nature of our experience and what the mind experiences, whether or not it's objectively accurate. This is what meditation and Dharma are to a very large degree about. It's called direct experience. What's actually happening? What's actually happening if I'm upset terribly because you called me a name I didn't like? What's actually happening? Well, words were spoken, concepts were formed, an emotional reaction and a story is created, and I'm now upset with Mary or upset about what Mary said. My direct experience seems to be I'm upset at what Mary said, or extra layers on top of it. Mary's a bad person. I don't want to be her friend anymore. Oh, poor me, why is it always me? But in Buddhist Dharma terms, none of the things I just described are actually the direct experience. We think it's the direct experience. You should have heard what Mary said, and she's a terrible person. Shouldn't sit in the middle of the front row. You're always the fall guy that way. The direct experience is simply auditory vibrations we call words came out of this being and were processed through the ear canal and the neurochemistry of the auditory neurology by this being and turned into a story. The direct experience is just words. Imagine if you could directly experience things without all that story, how simple and clear life could be. And this is possible, and many of us start to experience less belief in our mind stories as we meditate more. Hang with me. This will make more sense as I go along if this is the first time you've heard these sorts of teachings. For many of you, this is a familiar theme. I and other teachers elaborate. Back to dreams. Why did I mention dreams? Well, let's say all of us had a dream last night, and it was a bad dream. It was a nightmare. We were out hiking in the woods around here, around Cowichan Valley. Some of us are from there. And we run into a bear. I actually had a dream this week. I've been on a spate of remembering dreams after months and months of not remembering them. I actually had a dream that I was sleeping in a tent in the Yukon or somewhere, and a polar bear came toward me. I didn't used to know that polar bears are super dangerous because they look like super cute and they sell Coca-Cola and they could possibly be dangerous if you're a Coca-Cola bear. But of course, those of you that are more knowledgeable about that particular breed know that polar bears are actually quite dangerous because they're used to taking out seals, and we look like plump little seals, I think. So, in the dream, this bear is coming toward me, and my sort of lucid mind is saying, uh-oh, this is a bad situation. I might get eaten by this bear. Let's imagine we all had a dream last night of bear encounters, presumably not polar bears around here, but a black bear around here. And we were frightened in the dream, and maybe the dream got worse, and the bear actually started to savage us, bite us, chew on us, try to kill us, or effectively kill us. What would be our emotions? What would be our direct experience while we were dreaming the dream? What would your direct experience while you were in the nightmare be?
Fear.
Fear?
Panic.
Panic. Yeah. Is it actually happening? No. But the body cannot differentiate between a story in the head and the reality. So when we're dreaming, and we all know this, we've all had dreams, good dreams, happy dreams where we've woken up laughing, sad dreams, we've woken up crying, sexual dreams where we've woken up aroused or orgasming, fearful dreams where we've woken up, oh my goodness, oh, thank goodness it was just a dream. And there's that moment of lucidity in the first few seconds or minute of waking up from a dream where we realize it was just a dream. But as you so wisely reported, if each of us were dreaming last night of being savaged by a bear, we would be fearful and terrified and maybe even in physical pain in our dream. This is incredibly important. Don't forget this when you go home. If it's in your head, your body believes it. If your mental experience on consciousness, we'll call it for now, on the mind stream is that XYZ is true, I am being savaged by a bear, the body responds to that as reality, which is why we wake up from our bear nightmare, hearts pounding, fight or flight, sympathetic nervous system, cortisol, adrenaline, the same reaction we'd have in real life. I myself have encountered bears hiking. I'm sure a good half dozen of you in this room have as well. And the body goes, whoa, okay, please don't eat my dog or whatever. So why am I sharing that? Because you all understand it. You've all experienced it multiple times. And it's a teaching point around meditation and Dharma, which is be very, very careful what stories you cultivate in your own mind. What nightmares are you creating when you're awake? Mary's so mean and nobody likes me and I thought she was my friend and I can't trust anybody and I should just give up and be a hermit, and you know, what's the nightmare I'm creating in my mind while I'm awake? Well, I have allegedly control over what's going on in my mind. When we're sleeping, if you practice lucid dreaming and dream yoga and the tradition of some of the Tibetan teachings, you can also create control over your nighttime dreaming life. But most of us haven't created that yet. So for the purposes of today's talk, we'll say, well, we don't control what happens when we're asleep in our mind. But we can control what happens when we're awake. Be careful of painting nightmares instead of having the direct experience. Oh, Mary said something. I found it confusing and that's creating hurt in me. I'm going to clarify it with her. She says, oh, I was just teasing. I grew up in a family where one of the ways we showed our love and affection was we poked fun at each other. So I'm really sorry if that hit you wrong, but it was an affectionate quip. That's a different story. Right? And it can change my experience. My heart can settle. I can say, okay, well, thanks for letting me know that, and I'm sorry I'm a little oversensitive. I grew up in a super critical family where if someone said that, they meant it, and it was meant to be cruel, and it was meant to harm you. I didn't, by the way. I'm making the example up. But the story about the direct experience of the words that were said is what causes me trouble. Not Mary, and not her words. My own mind, and what I'm allowing to play on the screen of my mind. Imagine that a Tibetan or a Burmese or any denomination of a meditating monk or nun, she's a nun, and she comes to North America for the very first time, and you're hosting her, and you take her to the movies, and you take her to a scary movie, and you're one of the persons, like many, who are quite affected by scary movies. They scare you, they make you jump, especially with all the music and all the build-up, and you're like, you know the bad guy's going to jump out from behind the curtain, and when they do, you still jump. And the nun's looking at you like, don't you know this isn't real? Why are you acting like this is happening? It's clearly on the screen. Here, says the nun out of great compassion. Let me show you. And she takes you by the hand and she leads you up to the projectionist booth. I suppose it's not projection anymore, it's all digital, but work with me. And leads you up there to the digital booth, or the robot's pressing the button now, or whatever, and says, look, dear, it's okay. The images are coming from this machine. And look, they're being sent through the room to the back of the room on the screen. And now come, let's go to the screen. Come. when you go to the screen with her, and you come in and you see it's all just little pixels, it's all just little bits of light and data that are coming together, and when we're this close we just see pixels, we just see blue and green, little bits and pieces. And now as we back up and we back up and we back up, it starts to constellate into a picture of the scary person with the dagger, and it's not real. And you'd sheepishly say, yeah, I know it's not real. And she'd say, but why are you acting like it's real? Why are you frightened by, I don't know, is it Mike Myers in the Halloween movies or something? I don't know, these people. In my case, it would be the shark in Jaws. That was scary. Why are you scared? Oh, because I'm having the experience that it's real, even though I know it's not. And this is what's so cool. When we're in the movies or watching anything on any entertainment, we know it's not really happening right now. None of you have sort of the type of brain or psychiatric issue that would not allow you to separate reality from non-reality. You know it's a movie, but you still weep when the heroine dies. You're still moved by the beautiful story of the immigrant child talking about their experience of growing into themselves in their new country. It affects you, but you know it's not real, and yet we act as though it's real. So, 2 things I want you taking out of today as your explorations. One is, keep reminding yourself that what you dream at night affects you, because the body and mind are more or less one, and the body doesn't have an independent monitor to go, oh yeah, that's just a dream. It's only when you wake up that you're something or other, self, non-self says that was just a dream. And I want you to work with this idea of movies. And okay, yeah, I think for almost all of us, if not all of us in the room, we've been emotionally affected by something we've watched that we knew wasn't happening right now. Now bring that to your direct experience of your own mind when you're awake. This little example I've made up about Mary and I having a misunderstanding, leading to story that's not real. But my inability to step back from the screen and say, right, here's a movie where Cheryl's been injured by a friend's comments. It's just out there. Can I watch it dispassionately? Can I break it down to the pixels, the direct experience, and say, I do not have to interpret it this way. I don't need to react to it this way. It's not real. This is where this seeming overly simplistic practice that really doesn't appear as though it has any real relevance to daily life, watching the breath. You can imagine, and as scientists and wise people, well, training my attention to be more stable, that has some relevance. I could pay better attention to my child or friend when I'm speaking with them. I can pay more attention to that work report I'm working on, be less distractible. Those all seem very helpful. But really, how does it work in emotional life? How does it work when I'm hurt, confused, or frightened, or happy, or clinging, or seeking, or discontented, or chasing after things? It helps tremendously, because this simple practice of training the mind to focus on a single breath is training the mind to separate the direct experience from the story, the direct experience from the fantasy. What is actually happening at the basic level, at the bare bones level. And for the majority of us, for at least some of the time, and for some of us basically all the time in our practice, until the mind gets a little more trained, a little more firmly able to focus for a little bit of time, our meditations are pretty much story, right? And some of the stories are just kind of floaty, and oh, after this I'll go and this is what I'll do with my Saturday afternoon. And but it's story. It's completely irrelevant to your direct experience in the room at the Rotary Hall on Saturday while you're meditating with these beautiful people. What's actually happening is the body's here and you're attempting to do this practice. But in the movie of the mind, all this other stuff can happen. And for some of us, it's just jumping from image to image, idea to idea. If we have something challenging or exciting going on in our world, in our life, or in our day-to-day, often in the meditation, that challenging or exciting thing grabs us, plays a movie, and we're just absorbed in the movie. We mostly sleepwalk through our lives. I'm going to say that again. We mostly sleepwalk through our lives. We're not really tasting the meal. We're chatting about something else, or thinking about something else, or watching TV while we eat. we're not really having the direct experience of this meal. We're not really having the direct experience of this conversation. To some degree, yes, but we're also a bit distracted and maybe thinking of something else on what feels like a parallel stream while we have our conversation with our friend. We're sleepwalking through our life, we're believing nightmares to be true, we're forgetting it's a movie, and we're not having a full experience of being alive. This is where meditation, amongst many other factors, is a helpful practice. So, I wanted to talk a little bit about this topic. So how does it help in real life if you can start to tell yourself, and you can use a phrase that works for you, but it might be, this is just a movie. What's the story right now? Which part of this is real? Ask yourself this over and over. And what that can help you do on a very practical level is become less reactive in terms of sort of knee-jerk reaction. Oh, I can't believe that happened. Or you're so foolish. Or I hate it when that happens. Or oh, I need that. I'm not okay without that. Whatever our knee-jerk reaction is. I'm going to call that being reactive. The language, you may use these terms differently. That's fine. Totally fine. They can be used in different ways. But I'm going to call being reactive where we have a knee-jerk reaction to something. There isn't a gap to maybe make a choice. So if someone comes up and steps on your toe, and you're like, hey, what'd you do that for? That's reactive. If someone comes and steps on your toe, and by the way, it hurts when they step on your toe, and you sort of take a little moment, you create a little gap, you have a choice to respond in a number of ways. The knee-jerk one I'm calling reactive isn't with choice. It's just stimulus in, stimulus out. And many of us, at least myself, find that if we're reactive, we're not our best self. It's not always our wisest comment or our wisest response. A little moment, a little gap, and it might be a few seconds, literally 1 minute, to just gather ourselves, gives us the choice to, instead of react, we can, what I'm going to call respond. So in this languaging today, respond means I have just a moment or a few seconds where I kind of regroup and I choose how to respond. So it's got choice to it. We're saying reactivity, no choice, bing, bang, boom. Responsivity, I get a choice. Meditation helps create that little gap. It helps you be a little less reactive, or if you practice a fair bit, a lot less reactive. More chance to kind of go, oh, that happened, and respond, which arguably gives you more chance to be compassionate, wise, and behave more in alignment with perhaps the way you'd like to behave. So someone comes up and stomps on your foot and you punch them in the nose. There's a reactivity. Someone comes up and stomps on your foot and you go, ow, move your foot. There's more responsivity. Move it away, out of range. They stomp on your foot and it is painful. You move your foot, you sort of take a breath and say, why did you do that? And they say, I'm so sorry. I've got new progressive eyeglasses. I didn't see your foot. I'm really, really sorry. Are you okay? Or they say, because I'm mad at you. Or they say, I was trying to dance with you, or whatever. And you can choose to respond based on the information you get. I doubt I'm the only one in the room. I'd be delighted if I was the only one in the room, because it means you're all much wiser and further along than me. But I doubt I'm the only person in the room that sometimes just immediately reacts, and in a negative way, based on an instant story, right? Only a dumbass would stomp on my foot, like whatever the story is. It may not have even gone cognitive or gone into language, but it's like, bam! The more you cultivate the ability to pay attention, to separate the movie from reality, whatever reality is, that's another big conversation, the more you can create this gap. And some of the ways I refer to this idea is the idea that imagine your mind is like a busy train station. Any of you that have been Toronto, New York, London, any number of cities that has a reasonably busy underground or above ground train station system, and you go into a station, but you're in one of the central stations, like Grand Central Station in New York City or wherever, and there are multiple trains departing from that station. That's your mind. So there's all sorts of tracks, there's all sorts of possibility, there's all sorts of different trains arriving and leaving. And when we're a reactive person, we don't get to pick the train. We just randomly end up on a train. We walk into the station and someone stomps on our toe and boom, we're in frustrated train. Or boom, we're in, mad at you train. Or boom, we're on self-pity train. Or boom, we're on I should never leave the house train. Or whatever. But we didn't choose. We just ended up because we went reaction. There's no gap. There's no real mind control, I'm going to say whoa, that happened. I'm going to just take one beat and decide what train to get on. Maybe curiosity train. Why did that happen? Maybe self-soothing train. I'm going to take care of myself because I feel rattled right now. Maybe step away gracefully train. You don't have control over your life unless you have control over your mind. Let's be clear, in the broader sense of our life, we don't have control whether people come or go necessarily, whether they love us or stop loving us, whether they pass away, whether we get fired, whether we get evicted. We don't have control over a lot of external events, but boy, oh boy, we do. Most of us haven't cultivated it very well yet, but we have control over our internal events. We have control and choice over what train we get on. Don't beat yourself up. I still am reactive. I still get on the wrong train before I know I'm on it and have gone, 20 minutes down that track before realizing this is an unhelpful train. Cheryl, why'd you pick the self-righteous indignation train? How's it really helping? How's it really helping this situation with your friend, your partner, your coworker, your whomever? Yourself. Don't worry, we all get on the wrong trains. We're all reactive. We haven't trained our mind well enough or thoroughly enough or reliably enough yet that it's always responsive. Data in, evaluate the movie quickly, choose a warm, compassionate response. Wouldn't that be great? Data in, evaluate the movie, warm, compassionate response out. Because the movie's just a movie. And however it's affecting us, we do have the opportunity to shift that. Just the way we do when we wake up from a nightmare where we're being savaged by a bear. We wake up and the body's in fight or flight and the mind's consternated. And within usually a few seconds, depending how easily you awaken when you wake up, we say, oh, it was just a dream, and the mind calms right down, at least in terms of being afraid of bears. It's no longer afraid of bears. You're in your comfy bed with your feather pillow, and you're no longer afraid of bears. The body takes about 20 or 30 minutes to unflood for the physiology or fight or flight to settle. That's about a 20 to 30 minute process. If you're not re-stimulating it, it takes 20 or 30 minutes for it to settle out, parasympathetic nervous system to take over and regulate. So your body's still freaked out for a while, but your mind's okay. You're like, well, that was a pretty spooky dream, and here I am. Oh, I love my pillow. Oh, I love my bed. But you can't fall asleep right away. Reactivity has happened. That's a great little teaching, because it reminds us that when we react in a negative way, it affects our physiology. It distresses the body. So wouldn't it be lovely if we were better at creating that gap? The body still might start to go, but we'd have a gap to go, wait, and pull it back down a little bit and respond more skillfully. We'd have a chance to go, I'm 3/4 into the anger train, but 1 foot still on the platform. I realize I'm boarding this train. It's not a helpful train. I've been down this train track before. It does not end well. And you step back. And now you're in a place of, we're going to call it neutrality, where you can check different trains and choose what direction to go in. It's a deceptively simple thing, watching the breath. I have no desire to waste my time on the planet, or certainly to waste anybody else's, you lovely people, and offering and inviting you to practice something that's a waste of time. If I discover it's a waste of time, I'll stop teaching it. I'll teach something better. Haven't found anything better. Looked really hard. Turning 55 in a couple of weeks. So far, this is by far the best. And people way wiser than me, way more experienced than me, have, in my view, more or less proven the effectiveness of training your mind through meditation and through Dharma. If you're not familiar with what the word Dharma means in this context, it means the teachings of awakening, the teachings of Buddhism, the teachings of training the mind for clarity, compassion, and wisdom. See the movie. Take the advice of that lovely nun we've created together who says, don't you it's just a movie, dear. It's okay. It will all pass. This too shall pass. You shall pass. So when our movie is a real event in our life, the loss of a loved one, a diagnosis of a terminal illness, chronic pain, our pet passing away, all these real things, you can very wisely argue the points I'm offering today. Say, well, that's not a movie. It's happening in my real life. And I'll say, yes, but if you realize your experience of it is also being mediated through your thinking in your head and your emotional reaction to it, this concept of treating our experience as though it's a movie is helpful to reduce suffering, to help you maybe grieve more cleanly as you see the truth of the direct experience of all of us die. Some of us are lucky enough to age and then die, and that this is sad. And instead of elaborating a bigger story of I'll never be okay without him, I'll never feel okay again, just be with the direct experience of the truth of impermanence and loss, and be gracious and compassionate to your heart that's grieving. Watch out for the movies, the elaborations, the stories that layer on top of the direct experience. One of the elegant ways this is taught that I've always found helpful is that pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional. So pain happens. It's part of being alive in the world. Things change, they go up and down. We lose things, our bodies are fragile, things happen to them, and we die eventually, or maybe very quickly if it's an accident or something like that, a massive stroke, boom, we're gone. Pain is inevitable. That's not meant to be a negative or a bummer of a statement. It's a statement of reality, right? Anybody here experience any physical discomfort this week? Yeah. There's pain in the body. There's also joy and pleasure in the body and deliciousness in the body. But pain, when you're in a human or an animal form, when you're in a sentient form, is part of the experience. Anybody here experience any emotional discontent, discomfort of the tiniest or large degree this week? Yeah, sure. Pain's inevitable. Suffering is optional. What that teaching in that way means is the direct experience of ow, the ankle hurts, or the direct experience of ow, the heart hurts very badly because I've lost someone to death that I love. That's inevitable. It's part of being alive. But the suffering is the stories and the reactivity we pile on top of the pain. So I have a very small, minor, stable fracture of my ankle, and it doesn't hurt very much at all. Little tiny bit of discomfort. Very lucky. It's going to recover fine. But if I put on story, oh no, this is the second ankle in 7 months, which it is. I did this one 7 months ago. What's wrong with my body? Is it's going to keep happening? Do I have to stop hiking? With such terrible timing, I'm going on this conference and I'm going to have to be, lugging around this, and maybe I can't go on the conference next week. That's it. That's part's optional. That's Cheryl story making. That's me reacting to this situation with negativity, with fear. I'm creating a nightmare around the simple data. Now, this is a pretty minor problem, and I use that on purpose because I think it's easier for us to separate our story making from reality when it's a pretty minor problem. It's much harder if it's vast physical illness or pain, or the vastness of the death of a loved one. But something smaller, most of us can start saying, okay, I can just be with the simple reality of a little bit of pain, of physical pain, a little bit of pain of inconvenience and restriction of mobility through this small injury. But I don't have to pile suffering onto it, do I? And if I do, what's the outcome? Well, I suffer more. How is that helpful? Unless you're a masochist, and none of you are, well, maybe now and then you're a bit dramatic, but I am too. But you're not a masochist in that you seek and enjoy suffering. You wouldn't be here if you sought and enjoyed suffering. You'd be at a mall. Sorry. So we don't enjoy suffering, but holy smokes, are we ever getting on the wrong trains often? Are we not even noticing we have a choice? Not even owning that, okay, I did open the door and get on the self-righteous indignation train. I did open the door and get on the pity party, oh poor me, nobody has it as bad as me train. That I had some volition there. I may not have noticed I was doing it. I may not have deliberately opened the door and got on the train, but I still got on the train. And saying, oh, I wasn't aware isn't a very good excuse. It's a call to action. It's a call to action to say, I'd like to become more aware. I'd like to do a better job of noticing what train I'm getting on more often. I'd like to do a better job of catching that I'm on a suffering train more quickly. Only a kilometer down the track instead of 10 or 20. I'd like to be less reactive and more aware and more responsive. How will I do that? Well, if it was enough to conceptually understand it, we'd all be better at it from this moment on, because you're all wise and you all understand this. It's not a particularly complicated teaching. We can develop the capacity to have a gap and be more responsive, to catch the movie or the story while it's happening and evaluate it really quickly. You can do that in a second. You do it in a second or so if you're driving and the driving conditions change, right? You're driving and someone swerves in front of you, and in a second or two, you've evaluated the new story and made a correction, right? It's extraordinary. It's what the mind and body can do. Even if you were full on in daydream and someone swerved in front of you, boom, you're in and you make a decision and you're reactive, responsive in a way that stops you from crashing. Not always, but a lot of the time. You can do this. But until we realize it's possible, until we realize it's helpful, and until we start to practice this and experience that it's helpful, we're just sleepwalking. We're having nightmares all day, every day, and good dreams and horny dreams, and I'm going to win $1 million dreams, and if only I get this job, life will be perfect forever dreams. And it's not very helpful for liberating your suffering. Pain is inevitable, suffering's optional. Let's work on the optional part. It's what meditation's about. It's what Buddha Dharma is about. It's what it is to train your mind. You can do this today, and you don't have to do it all on a meditation cushion or chair. You can do it in the mall. You can go in and notice if you find that pleasant or unpleasant. You can notice what stories you're making up, what judgments you're making up, what you are drawn to. Ooh, I like this store with the lovely fluffy meditation cushions for sale. And what you're not drawn to. Oh no, I'm not into this store with the whatever for sale. I don't know. Raw meat or something. That's me. That wouldn't draw me. Draw my cat though. So what is it that draws us and doesn't draw us? Where's the pleasant? Where's the unpleasant? Where's the reactivity? Where's the judgment of self and other? That's story making. Stop making up nightmares when you're awake. And if you find yourself wasting time, and yeah, it's a bit of a tough thing to say, but I believe it's an accurate one. If you find yourself wasting time in a lot of positive story making, don't do that either. And by that I mean daydreaming, and if I win $1 million, I'm going to do this, and things will be so much better when. That's not particularly helpful. It's a waste of time. It's just a much more pleasant waste of time to have a pleasant dream than a nightmare. And of course, let me clarify so there isn't confusion. I'm not saying we shouldn't plan. Of course we should plan. It's how we move our lives forward and pay our bills and maybe create a more interesting livelihood and volunteer opportunities, do more compassionate things. But I'm talking about all the wasted daydreaming that we know a lot of us do. Just daydreaming. And when you're daydreaming, you're not awake. You may be driving or talking, but you're not awake. Because awakeness in Buddha Dharma means clear, having the direct experience, warm, alive, compassionate, and bright in the mind. That's what it is to be awake. Awakening is an excellent translation for nibbana or nirvana, which is often translated as enlightenment. Awakening is arguably a better translation of the quality of what the word nirvana or nibbana speaks toward, which is to have a fully awake mind that's never dreaming. It's never lost in story. It's not creating reactivity. It's having the direct experience of whatever's happening here and now. And if that is an experience that's unpleasant, there's a grace and an equanimity and an ease to this is unpleasant. This is the nature of reality some of the time. And if what's happening is pleasant, there's a grace, there's an ease, this is pleasant, the mind state, the life occurrences are pleasant right now, this is also part of what happens. And this too will change, and then you can enjoy it fully as it is while it lasts, without regret, without clinging. I used to, as a kid, and I think a lot of us might have as a kid, really look forward to Christmas, because, we had 4 grandparents who lived in town and 2 parents, and they were all generous, and there was quite a boatload of gifties under that tree come Christmas morning, and we were very, very lucky, and it was really, really fun. And I would anticipate Christmas, as a lot of us did, even though we were, wrapped present Christians. We weren't proper Christians at all. It was just all about trees and gifties. And I would anticipate Christmas, but there'd always be this tinge of, but then it will be over. I don't know if any of you had that. There's like, it's going to be great, but then it'll be over. I can't wait, but then it'll be over. The anticipation and then the letdown. I actually remember, some of you have heard me share this little memory, but I remember I grew up in Duncan, and both sets of my grandparents lived in Duncan. And on Boxing Day, we'd usually go to one or the other grandparents' house for another meal. And I remember being in the car, and it was generally dreary and raining on December 26th in the Cowichan Valley and here. And I remember being in the car, and we'd be driving in daylight, noontime or something, to my grandparents' house on the other side of town. And I remember everything looked so depressing to me on Boxing Day. Like the lights would still be on, but it was like noon and gray and rainy. And the same lights that were so hopeful and glorious leading up to the 25th looked to me, weird little kid that I was, depressing and just defeated the next day. And the trees kind of looked sad, and it was all kind of blood. I mean, it was nice to go have a meal, but there weren't any more presents today. So, greedy little monkeys, aren't we? Well, clinging and greed is one of the 3 root causes of suffering, right? Why do I share that story? Because in your own way, we can each relate to when we are experiencing something pleasant, in this case, kids and gifties, and we're looking forward to it. There's often this hidden thorn in the rose of, but it won't last forever, but then it's going to be over. And I actually heard a kid say this year, now that I think of it, oh, it's going to be another whole year. I'm like, yep, it's going to be another whole year. It's like kind of, 364 days of despair until the next Christmas day. So I mention that because clinging to the good is also suffering. Just be with the good. Enjoy the gifts, and they come and they go. Don't worry about the next set. Just be with them more fully. Or you, and I'm sure some of you or all of you have experienced actually having your joyful experience of something tainted by knowing it's going to end. You're on day 4 of your Mexican week away, and you're like, it's day 4 though. There's only 3 more days to go. And you might then shove that aside and really enjoy, but there's that sting of longing in the greed, the sting of longing of trying to hang on or make permanent the impermanent pleasant. So I'm emphasizing that because we all understand far too well the suffering that comes with the unpleasant. But there's suffering in the pleasant if you cling to it, if you try to control it. There does not need to be any suffering in any of it if you're just, this is unpleasant and this in time will pass, hopefully. Meaning if you're dying, then that too will pass, but not everything that happens to us is going to resolve. But it will change and it will pass. But when you're in the pleasant, embrace it, love it in this moment, fully experience this delicious lunch or this simple bowl of soup. Actually directly experience it. That's being awake. That's what nirvana means to a large degree. That's what it is to be alive and awake without suffering. You might still have pain because that's the nature of reality, but you do not have to have suffering. Be careful of the movies. Change the channel. Get on a different train. Take command of the projector when you can. And sometimes we do this. Sometimes we take our mind in hand and we train it. And we say, I'm not going to dwell on that thing that happened. How's that work? Depends, right? Depends how graspy the thing that happened is. If it was minor, then probably you can let it go fairly easily. If it was medium, it depends on your strength of mind and heart in that moment when you're saying, I'm gonna leave that be. I'm not gonna poke at it anymore. You might succeed because you've got a strong heart and mind in that moment. If it's a really big thing, and or your heart and mind are feeling fragile, worn out, consternated, etc., you may have a hard time not creating suffering, a conflagration around a tiny little flame by our reaction to it. Think of the candle flame as the pain, and you dumping the gasoline on it, the suffering. So please don't beat yourself up if, like me, you far too often dump gasoline on things, including today, yesterday, etc. But the fact that you're realizing, oh yeah, I do that sometimes. I really get on the wrong train, and sometimes I even get on it on purpose. I'm going to give them a piece of my mind. I'm going to get on the piece of my mind train or whatever. That's okay. You're human. You're not fully awake yet, I don't think. And if so, yahoo, I'm not. So we train, hopefully, because we don't like suffering. And we don't like harming other people with our reactivity. And we don't like harming ourselves with our reactivity. We would like to be warmer and happier and share more of our good heart and our good being. We'd like to say, wow, what's going on that you stomped on my foot? What's up? Are you all right? Not be good. Reactive equals suffering and ignorance. And ignorance is a word that in the Pali language is a translation of the word moha, and it's one of the 3 root causes of suffering. Being ignorant of the nature of reality is what it means. Reality is all that happened is that your foot stepped on my foot. I don't know why. I don't know your intention. I don't know the outcome. So I can react based on very little data, or I can respond and go, oh, what was that about? And then move on from there based on the data I collect. Here's why, among many other reasons, a lot of us spend time training the mind. Watching the direct experience of what? Of the sensation of breathing at the nose or the chest or the belly. Pretty simple story. Not a lot there. That's purposeful. On the template of focusing on the breath, you can begin to see the mind, depending what it's up to in any given meditation session, projecting vast movies onto a fairly empty screen. And you can start to notice that. And you can start to notice, what's my reactivity or response to the story? Can I drop the story and come back to the breath? Imagine if you're partway onto the story train when Mary says something, and you drop the story and come back to the breath and say, boy, what you just said hit me kind of really weird. And I'm just letting it go. Hang on. And now I let it go. This is all very practical training. As I've said before, I have no desire to make all of you great meditation masters who sit in your closet watching your breath and get into exquisite states of deep jhanic absorption. It's useful to do that because then your mind's more concentrated and more biddable. What I'm interested in is helping you be great human beings, to bring compassion and wisdom, kindness and curiosity to your life and to others, to serve others just at work or in your friendships, or by being aware of garbage between here and your car, and you actually pick it up, put it in a bin. That's what Dharma is about as well. It's being awake in your life, being awake in the world, being awake in your heart and your relationships in your workplace, being clear and compassionate, less reactive, more wise. I'm sure most of us have worked with someone somewhere in our schooling or our career who was very reactive, right? And it stressed everybody. You might have been that person. Probably it was me. So you either are that person or have been that person, or have been around people who was like, damn it, that wasn't supposed to happen. They're reactive. And what does it do to the physiology of everybody else in the office, right? Is it pleasant? No. It affects people. Maybe only a little bit. You just come to accept that that's Neil, he's explosive, he eventually calms down or whatever. But it has an impact. You notice this with your pets. If you have pets and you're like, drop a cup on the floor and it shatters, and you're like, darn it, the dog or the cat's like, whoa, is it okay, Mom? What's up? Why? Because we're energetic beings and we do affect other people with our words, gestures, actions, etc. So be aware. If you've worked with someone who's reactive instead of responsive, you probably found it unpleasant. What if you've worked with someone who was responsive instead of reactive? The team was planning to execute this thing today, and then you get some really bad news that the supplies you need didn't arrive at the warehouse. And like it's all hooped now. You can't do what you were going to do this afternoon, and it's an important thing. And let's say the team leader's a responsive type. And they're like, okay, wow, that was really unexpected. Let's take a moment. Let's regroup. Okay, let's brainstorm how we're going to manage this. That's pleasant. That's also more effective. It's also going to lead to a better outcome for your business, your company, and your team. So being able to have that gap, which we develop in many ways, but one of them is through meditation. Being able to kind of grab the mind before it runs down the train and go, and even doing that, by the way, I can't believe it. Hang on. Okay, clearly this is kibosh our whole afternoon's plan, guys. Let's see what we can do about it. That's great. That's great. That's a heck of a great start. You react, you catch it, you pull back, you take a moment, and then you respond. It's also great parenting. It's also great being in a couple. You know what I'm saying? You don't know, hang on. Murderous thoughts towards spouse. Calming. Watching the story. Such an idiot. Why did you marry an idiot? Calming. And then so hun, about the thing that happened, could we, right? Very practical advice for your mind, your heart, your relationships, your work life, your being in the world. And it begins one breath at a time. It begins being better at noticing the stories projected on the screen. Here I am at the Rotary Hall, taking 20 or 30 minutes to just focus on breath. Wow, look at the movie. And put a little nun on your shoulder. Just a movie, let it go. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Anila. Thank you. Come on back. New movie. Oh, it is a good one. I like this movie. It's my favorite movie. How about you meditate? Oh, thank you, Anila. Back to the breath. Start to separate reality, direct experience, from story making and moving. Start to wake up instead of dream, and be very cautious about all the dreams and nightmares you make up all by yourself while you're walking around. The bears you create. There's a little quip, like a little koan or a little poem or a haiku that I adore to illustrate this point. It's not mine. And it is, there was a monk, a monster so fearsome he painted that he fainted. Think about that. There was a monk, a monster so fearsome he painted that he fainted. This is what we do. We create the monster in our head, and it's so scary we faint. Another way that is taught, this is another old story, I don't recall the source right now, I apologize for that, but there's a meditator who's doing some deep meditation, working with their teacher, and they start to experience during meditation this giant spider, as high as this window, starting to come into the meditation room. And of course it's terrifying, just like our bear nightmare is terrifying. And they go report this to the teacher. They say, well, when I'm meditating, there's this giant spider, at the door sort of coming toward me. And I want to kill it. Like, I've got to kill it. It's going to get me. And the teacher says, just sit with it and observe. Next day, the spider comes, this close. Goes back to the teacher, says, there's this giant spider. It's going to eat me, and I need to kill it. Teacher says, just give it another day. Promise you won't kill it. And he says, okay, I am now in the mat rolling stage of wanting to leave retreat, but okay. Goes, now the spider gets to about here. You can see the gnashing of the mandibles or whatever it is spiders have. Pretty yucky. And he goes back, okay, tomorrow's the day it's going to get this close. It's going to eat me. And the teacher says, one more day, but what I want you to do, and he gives them a pot of paint, red paint with a little brush. And he says, when it gets close enough to touch, I want you to draw just a red circle, red dot on its chest, and then come back and report to me. Promise you won't kill it. Okay, goes back, spider's like right here. Draws a red circle, comes out of meditation, no spider, looks down, red circle on his chest. This is what we do with our mind. We create monsters so fearsome, so terrible, and then we faint from them. And we do this when we create those stories in our mind based on reality. Some of it, you did get fired. You can't pay your mortgage. You did get a cancer diagnosis. Someone has said, I've cheated on you and I think I want to end our romantic relationship. There is direct experience of painful stuff. Pain is inevitable. Suffering is optional. Realize that you then create the monster and the spider instead of being with as much grace for yourself, as much compassion for self and others, as much equanimity as you can with this very difficult circumstance. That's how you can move through the ups and downs of life and keep your equipoise, keep your kindness more often, be less reactive, and be wiser and happier. The Buddha taught suffering and the cessation of suffering. All of this is to help us suffer less and live life more fully with a more compassionate heart. This is what the teachings are about. So, let's, for about 5 minutes, have a sit. I will ring the bell 3 times at the end, and I encourage you to take on a lovely little practice, which is the first time the bell rings, stay with your meditation and allow the second tone to come to you, just to arrive to your ears in your direct experience, and the third tone to come to you and arise in your direct experience. Instead of what we often do, which is we hear the bell and we sort of start to, we're finished now. That's not bad. I'm just saying it's very cool to just, there's a bell, back to breath. Allow the second tone to arise, back to breath. Allow the third time the bell to arise, back to breath. And then take an extra breath before you open your eyes. You know, explore that. Exploring the direct experience of being with what's happening instead of moving ahead to, oh, we're done now and I'll do the next thing, which is our natural tendency till we train ourselves away from it. So settling into your chair or your posture and just allowing the Dharma Talk to settle in. The mind may be busy or still or swaying between. That's fine. Just inviting the attention to focus with whichever area you were practicing with earlier, belly, chest, or nostrils. And just the simplicity of focusing as best you're able on the direct experience of breathing in and out for these few minutes of sitting together. We close with a dedication. For the sake of all beings, may there be wisdom and compassion. May we train our minds to get on wise, compassionate, loving trains, bringing more equanimity, compassion, and kindness and wisdom to our own minds and lives and to our interactions with others. May all beings be well. May all beings be happy. May all beings be free from the optional suffering and navigate the ups and downs of life with grace.